Morant with a running start. Elevate! Dunks! Oh my goodness! Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn. His heat is gone! Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now with three. Count it! A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance. Adams going long. Morant! He hit it! John Morant, insanity!
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parrish. We have bad news all around on today's episode. The Grizzlies fell to 0-3 on their current road trip with a Friday night loss to the Clippers, meaning they are still winless in California this season. But beyond that, the team released a medical update on Brandon Clarke and declared him out for the season. He has a sprained ligament in his knee, and he is not going to play anymore this year. And that is a big blow to a Grizzlies team that is currently slumping badly and limping to the finish line, it seems like, of this season. So on today's episode, we've got a lot of not fun stuff to talk about. Before we get into it, just a reminder, if you want to support the creation of the show, do that at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. I'm currently involved in some March Madness bracket challenges with my Patreon supporters. So if you want to get access to stuff like that, if you want an extra bonus monthly episode, if you want to join the listener Slack channel where we talk about the Grizzlies around the clock, you can do all of that at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. All right. Before the Brandon Clarke news, we just had a regular basketball game on Friday night. The Grizzlies were trying to bounce back from some ugly losses to the Kings and the Trailblazers, and they were playing a very good Clippers team that was on a 4-game win streak. The Grizzlies were without Ja Morant once again, whose sore hamstring has now become a strained hamstring. Still no medical update on Ja Morant. The injury report for the Tuesday night game against the Jazz doesn't come out until much later today on Monday. So no Ja Morant. They shuffled up the starting lineup, I guess based on the previous losses. They moved Zach Edey to the bench. I thought it was a little bit notable that when playing a team with a large center, such as Zubac, they said, no, actually, let's move Edey to the bench. But I think it was the right call. They put Santi Aldama in the starting lineup. Also, Luke Kennard, who had been struggling of late, he was moved to the bench role. Scottie Pippen Jr., who had been playing so well off the bench, he got to start. So, they switched up the starting lineup, and they got off to a good start. I felt like they were taking it a little bit seriously with the rotation. I mean, sure, maybe you think Jay Huff still shouldn't be that high up in the rotation, but like Jay Huff had a fine game. Heavier Conchar minutes, but they were leaning on Desmond. They were leaning on Jaren. And because of the three-point shot going in, it felt like, they were hanging in there. And I honestly was pretty optimistic about this game just because there's no science to this. I was optimistic just because usually in the NBA, when things start trending a certain way, it bounces back. And I felt like the Grizzlies had a great chance to bounce back here. Sure, they hadn't won many road games, if any, against good teams in the West. And sure, they've been on a extended slump. And yes, they hadn't won many basketball games without Ja Morant. So I thought it was a perfect chance for the bounce back opportunity. In the first half, I was like, nice, this is the bounce back opportunity. But then the game flipped in the third quarter. The Clippers took control. And then it ended up being a rather comfortable blowout win. And the Grizzlies lost this game by 20. And that, I think, once again, sent us fans just searching for answers. The team is clearly scrambling and searching for answers. And some of the awful numbers about what's been going on with the Grizzlies. If you missed it last episode, I broke down how the defensive numbers, those have been trending the wrong way for a really long time. The Grizzlies have now played 71 games, and if you split the season in half, I mean, you could draw the line either the past 35 games or the past 36 games. Either way, the Grizzlies are 20th in defensive rating over that span. But this loss to the Clippers, this was the Grizzlies' 7th loss since the trade deadline by double digits. In the 51 games before the trade deadline, they only lost 5 games by double digits. Since the trade deadline, the team is 8-12 overall. They've fallen to 5th in the West, and basically, I mean, the 2 seed's long gone. The 2 seed's over. The 3 seed, it's going to be hard getting there, too. But you're 8-12 since the trade deadline. You are 1-11 on the season in road games against the top 9 teams in the West. 0-2 against the Thunder, 0-2 against the Rockets. You haven't played the Nuggets on the road yet. That game's coming up later. You're 0-2 against the Lakers. You're 0-2 against the Clippers. 0-2 against the Kings. 0-2 against the Warriors. Again, add that up. That's 0-8 in California this year. Your one road win against a Western Conference team in the top 9 is against the Timberwolves. You're 1-1 on the road against the Timberwolves. And I have a hard time separating what the team has done recently with the trade deadline, which I found appalling. The Grizzlies are 1-6 without Ja Morant since the trade deadline. I don't know why that is. Maybe that's random. I mean, Marcus Smart wasn't playing a lot before the trade deadline. Jake LaRavia was playing a lot before the trade deadline. But this team earlier this year was able to survive when Ja Morant didn't play. Maybe it's just the opponents. Maybe you're playing harder opponents right now. But they've lost 6 of 7 when Ja Morant isn't available. To me, that reflects a little bit poorly on the roster and the decisions made to build this roster around Ja and Desmond and Jaren. And then we come to the Brandon Clarke injury. Brandon Clarke was injured against the Trailblazers and is going to miss the year. And that, of course, is terrible luck. It's very bad luck. Not having Ja Morant and Brandon Clarke, that's bad luck. Sort of. It is bad luck that you needed to plan for. It is absolutely the kind of thing that you needed to have some kind of risk mitigation set up for this scenario. Ja Morant missing games is a known quantity and should be one of the focuses of your team when you build the team. Brandon Clarke not being available, I mean, we're a year plus from his torn Achilles, but this is a guy with significant injury concerns. This is not hindsight is 2020. Go back and listen to basically any preview show I did the previous summer, last summer. Any off-season recap thing I did, this is how I think the team should build the roster. I went back and checked them. I wanted to know my receipts. Was I remembering it wrong? I went back and listened to some of my off-season shows last summer. And the thing we're talking about, the thing everyone talked about coming into this year or at the end of last year, the big issues for the Grizzlies roster. Well, obviously, the first one was we need a center. The Grizzlies need a center. How are we going to replace what Steven Adams brought this team a couple of years ago? The Grizzlies need a center. And then it was, all right, how's Ja Morant bounce back? Can we depend on Brandon Clarke? Like, those were high up on the things we were talking about. What's Ja Morant going to look like? Who's going to be the center? Then maybe third was, are they going to make a consolidation trade and upgrade the wing? And then next was probably, what does Brandon Clarke look like? Brandon Clarke's a big part of this team when healthy. What's he going to look like? And he was a big part of this team this year. Brandon Clarke looked good this year. Brandon Clarke was a crucial piece for the Grizzlies. Brandon Clarke was tasked with closing games many times. Brandon and Jaren playing together, in my mind, was the Grizzlies' path to advancing in the playoffs. And now that's gone. For me, I thought the Grizzlies were going to be underdogs in a first-round series with Brandon Clarke. This is with Brandon Clarke closing games. Now that Brandon Clarke's out, I don't have much optimism, if any, that the Grizzlies can win a playoff series. I mean, if Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr. are all healthy, great. You got a puncher's chance. But what have you done around those guys? What did you do with that one big offseason question, the first one, about your starting center? And this injury to Brandon Clarke, it once again highlights the shortcomings of the roster that was built. It highlights the shortcomings of the strategy at the trade deadline. And even some moves from the offseason that I was agnostic on because I didn't have all the information, like drafting Zach Edey. I'm like, okay, this might work. What if Zach Edey's really good? I don't scout these guys. I'm going to trust our front office, which has been excellent at drafting players. Let's see what happens. But now that we see the strategy at the trade deadline, which was just salary dump Marcus Smart. Yes, they tried to acquire. Apparently, they were close to acquiring Dorian Finney-Smith. But, again, we can look at that in hindsight and say, hey, that was somewhat about Dorian Finney-Smith, the player, but also that deal was more about getting off of John Konchar's money and hoping Dorian Finney-Smith opts out after next season. They hoped it was a two birds with one stone situation. This guy can help us on the court this year. Also helps our salary situation going forward. But you look at the Zach Edey draft pick selection, and in hindsight, it looks like they drafted Zach Edey for need. They said, we need a starting center. We don't want to sign a free agent. We don't want to use our mid-level exception because we don't want a $10 or $12 million contract on the books going forward in addition to the big money we have to pay a top 10 pick. Maybe I'm going conspiracy theory here, but to me it looks like they didn't draft the best player available. They drafted for need. They took a center because they needed a center and didn't want to sign one. Even though a center is by far the easiest position to find in free agency. But instead of using the mid-level exception, instead of adding additional salary going forward, they said, no, we don't want to spend the mid-level exception on a guy because we want to have as clean of a salary cap sheet as possible. We need a clear space, so hopefully we can renegotiate and extend Jaren in case he doesn't make All-NBA. Instead of building up your team for this year and for next year. And like I said in the offseason, before they drafted Zach Edey, what are the odds a rookie can start for you and close playoff games for you? What are the odds any player picked 9th is going to help you win a playoff series their rookie season? I said those odds are remote. And now that we've seen Zach Edey, he's okay. But I don't think he's going to help you win a playoff series. And there actually are a couple of numbers about Zach Edey I want to get to later on. But the big issue is this offseason, which I graded the offseason in an episode that came out 8 months ago. I gave the offseason a D because I said, how have you built around the squad with the avenues that were available to you? You added 2 rookies, Jalen Wells and Zach Edey, and then you shuffled some things around to keep Luke Kennard. And you did these things to avoid the luxury tax. Like a year ago, I think the consensus around the Grizzlies was they're going to be a luxury tax team this year. We were focused on dodging the first apron. No. They dodged the luxury tax. And then people who defended the offseason, and you can say the draft was great. You got a contributor in Zach Edey, and you hit a home run in the second round with Jalen Wells. Although Jalen Wells has trailed off a lot. Is Jalen Wells going to help you win a playoff series this year? Hopefully. Maybe. But even if you grant them hitting a home run in the draft, most people said, well, let's not grade the offseason based on the moves they made as far as bringing in veterans, because they've set themselves up to make a move. They can see how this season goes. They can see how Marcus Smart fits. And then they haven't closed any doors to themselves. They can still make a trade to get a wing. Or if you need a better center, they can make a trade to do that. Well, now we do have hindsight. They didn't do any of those things. They salary dumped Marcus Smart. They used a first-round pick to salary dump Marcus Smart. In the last year, they sent out $30 million in matching salary and a first-round pick and a second-round pick for nothing. They're paying Marvin Bagley, Johnny Davis, and Mamede Diakite with that money. The consolidation trade is never happening. One of the reasons I really hated the Marcus Smart deal is because you lost that matching salary. One of the reasons I hated the Zaire Williams deal was you just lost the matching salary. Usually the tenet for roster building in the NBA is you keep your assets alive. You don't let them leave for nothing. You keep the roster spots or the salary slots, you just keep them. This is why you flip guys on expiring deals. This is why you trade away a Courtney Lee for a few second-round picks. This is why you try to get the trade exceptions and then turn that into something else. You don't let the salaries expire for nothing. Paying to get off salaries so they expire for nothing? Like, oh, you got back a trade exception. We're not using those trade exceptions. We didn't use the Steven Adams trade-a-player exception. One reason I hated the Marcus Smart trade is because you're never bringing another player back. The dream of bringing somebody else in to this roster who makes $20 million, that died when you traded away Marcus Smart. I feel like more people should be upset about the Grizzlies sending out $30 million in matching salary in the last year and a first-round pick and a second-round pick and getting Marvin Bagley back. Beyond losing useful rotation players, beyond losing Jake LaRavia because you declined his option, and Marcus Smart, and Zaire Williams, and replacing them with two-way players and rookies, Jay Huff, Lamar Stevens, Scottie Pippen Jr., Jalen Wells, Zach Edey, you tripled down on youth once again, quadrupled down on youth once again. And where it really matters is when you have injuries. When the guys who you went into the season concerned about their health actually go down, now you're stuck with who's going to play right now. Zach Edey has to play. Jay Huff's playing rotation minutes. I mean, even the two-way slots that you had success with, the two-way players who you've promoted, like Scottie Pippen Jr. is a success story. Good job. But when Ja Morant is out and it's like, all right, we're starting Scottie Pippen Jr. That's not an ideal situation. Like you hit a double there, you hit a single, you got a useful rotation player out of your two-way slot. Good. But we're talking about beating, the Nuggets or the Lakers or the Warriors or the Timberwolves or the Rockets or the Clippers in a series. At this point, hey, that's a nice success story. It doesn't mean as much as, hey, who's a player who can help us win a playoff series? And then you think about the other success stories coming out of the two-way spots. Gigi Jackson and Vince Williams Jr. They've been big disappointments this year. The team bet. I mean, a generous reading of the last year of transactions for the Grizzlies. A generous reading is they had the utmost faith in Gigi Jackson and Vince Williams Jr. Gigi Jackson's been demoted to the Memphis Hustle. He's not even with the team. Vince Williams Jr., my guy, a guy I believe strongly in, has really been not very good. There are questions about his health. Maybe he's banged up. Again, fingers crossed. We kind of hope he's banged up to explain why he's been so bad this year. But even in my belief, I think you would call me one of the most fervent believers in Vince Williams Jr. over the past 12 months. Even in my belief, I still thought Marcus Smart was going to be closing playoff games. Go back and listen. I think we still thought Marcus Smart was going to play a huge role on this team up until the point he was traded away. And then we try to retcon, he was traded away because they don't need him. They can't trust him. They want to give those minutes to Gigi Jackson. They want to give those minutes to Vince Williams Jr. We're fully healthy. We got Luke Kennard playing well. We got Luke Kennard and Ja and Dez. We'll trade that guy away. It's like, no, now you're hurt. Now you're missing your one veteran with finals experience. The guy who was here for the locker room. And then that goes back to the record after the trade deadline and what effect, if any, Marcus Smart had on that, or Jake LaRavia, or did losing those members of the locker room, did that affect the morale of the team somehow? Was it a tight-knit group? Is it just the schedule? The schedule's gotten harder. Have they stopped listening to Taylor Jenkins? Is Taylor Jenkins searching for answers? Is the new offense not working anymore? Have the opponents figured the new offense out? I mean, the offensive numbers, not ideal. They're bad since the trade deadline. All the numbers are bad since the trade deadline. The numbers against the best teams, they're bad. And now the Grizzlies, for a year that started off so incredibly promising, you were the 2 seed at the trade deadline, and now you're slipping down the standings. And then you lose Brandon Clarke. I am devastated about the loss of Brandon Clarke. I love Brandon Clarke. Brandon Clarke, one of my all-time favorite players. Just love the guy. And not being able to have him. I mean, maybe Santi's having a great year. Maybe Santi can step up. Maybe Edey will be ready. Maybe Marvin Bagley. If you're not going to play Marvin Bagley now, like, what are you doing? Anyways, let's get more into who the Grizzlies are going to play now with no Brandon Clarke. And also, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Clippers game right after this short break. All right, the loss to the Clippers on Friday night, that was the 5th straight time the Clippers have beaten the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies made 19 three-pointers, shot a good percentage on those threes, but it wasn't enough. Jaren led the team with 23 points, but it took him 24 field goal attempts to get there. Aldama in the starting lineup had 16 points, 5 rebounds, and 7 assists. Scottie Pippen Jr., he had his streak of games with at least 2 steals snapped, but he started the game, so he gets to keep his streak going of having at least 2 steals while coming off the bench, still tied with Nick Kalathis with 8 straight games doing that. Desmond Bane only scored 10 points, and he was questionable for the game with a back injury. I'm going to conclude his back was really bugging him. We've seen this, unfortunately, from Desmond Bane in the playoffs, where he had horrible back issues and he had subpar games, and we're like, hey, that wasn't a good game for Desmond Bane. And we found out later he could barely move because of his back. So Desmond only got up 7 field goal attempts, scored 10 points. I'm guessing his back was killing him. Vince Williams Jr., 2 for 11 from the field. Missed 6 out of his 7 3-point attempts. Vince's season, like we've been saying, is not going very well. My advice to stop shooting 3-pointers was not heeded. However, most of his threes were unbelievably wide open because the other team is daring him to shoot. 1 3 was a heave. Good job taking the heave. So we don't count that miss. But like, Vince keeps missing shots. Vince also got a horrible whistle in this game. Vince was given none of the leeway or luxury that James Harden was provided when driving towards the basket. There were several questionable calls that James Harden got. Meanwhile, Vince was trying to initiate contact, was not getting the whistle from the refs. Zach Edey in this game, coming off the bench, basically his first play in the game, got awesome position, got the offensive rebound, dunked it home. That's what Zach Edey provides, as we know. the offensive rebounding. But unfortunately, Zach Edey has not provided much else. Zach Edey in this game, yes, 4 offensive rebounds. That's tremendous. Ends up with a total of 8 rebounds, scores 8 points, is 3 for 9 from the field. My big thing was Zach Edey. I mean, one of them. Zach Edey's touch on short hooks and in the paint, it's awful. I thought this guy could score at the NBA level. Yeah, at the rim, he's great. Dunking, he's great. He's huge. He can dunk. But right now on the season, on shots 3 to 10 feet away from the basket, Edey shoots 40%. 40% when he's 3 to 10 feet away from the basket. That's horrible. He's 49% on hook shots, according to Basketball Reference, but 40% from 3 to 10 feet is not good at all. I mean, by comparison, Jonas Valanciunas makes 56% of his field goal attempts from 3 to 10 feet. All right, that's not a fair comparison. Jonas is an unbelievably good offensive player. He is a player available for the MLE. They didn't want. Steven Adams, this year, 53% from 3 to 10 feet. Steven Adams. Like Clint Capella, basically been benched for Onyeka Okongwu. Clint Capella, 43%, also bad from 3 to 10 feet. But that's a comparable player from 3 to 10 feet. My guy Gogo Batadze, 57% from 3 to 10 feet. Rookie Kel'el Ware, 58% from 3 to 10 feet. Edey's only making 40% of his shots from 3 to 10 feet from the basket. I thought he was supposed to have developed, polished post moves, and he was supposed to be able to score with his back to the basket. He cannot score with his back to the basket. That's been a big disappointment. And again, he's a rookie. But depending on a rookie to fill in for you and start and maybe close playoff games and not having any other backup options, like not having a plan in case the Zach Edey plan or the Zach Edey pick didn't work out. That's my issue. This roster was built without fail-safes. There's no backup plan. So like, hey, what if this doesn't work out? This is risky. What if it doesn't work out? Anyways, Luke Kennard broke his slump of sorts coming off the bench, had 15 points, made 3 out of 5 3-pointers. I mean, Jay Huff, 13 points in 13 minutes. Good job. Made 3 3-pointers. Conchar played 13 minutes, did not score. Got a rebound. They didn't use Marvin Bagley. Marvin Bagley and Cam Spencer played garbage time. Honestly, when I look at the team now with no Brandon Clarke going forward, all right, hopefully John Morant returns and is fine. Fingers crossed. So you feel pretty good still. John Morant, Desmond Bane. Hopefully Desmond Bane's fine as he deals with the back issue. But John Morant, Desmond Bane, Luke Kennard, Scottie Pippen Jr. All right, you got a pretty good set of guards right there. Maybe a little small, but that's good. Jaren and Santi, your 2 best bigs. I mean, go ahead and start them, close with them. That's what we got. Zach Edey's your 3rd big. There's nothing else. I mean, you can play Jay Huff some. Will Jay Huff play over Zach Edey in the playoffs? It's possible. But when I look at that, I say, give Marvin Bagley a chance. What else do we have? Give Marvin Bagley a shot here. And I don't think they're interested as an organization. They're not interested in Marvin Bagley. That's my impression. They seem to be only focused on their homegrown players. Marvin Bagley was the acquisition price for getting off of Marcus Smart. But at this point, with Zach Edey languishing at times out there, with no Brandon Clarke, play Marvin Bagley. What do we have to lose? Give Marvin Bagley a chance. I mean, I know he's washed out of some bad organizations. The Pistons, the Wizards, the Kings didn't want him. I'm not saying Marvin Bagley's good, but I am saying Marvin Bagley can score and rebound, and he can catch lobs. Let's try it out. What's the worst that could happen? But even if you don't play Bagley, so your 3 bigs, Santi, Jaren, and Zach, and then you got your 4 guards you feel good about. And then you got to pick a wing. I guess it's Jalen Wells. Jalen Wells against the Clippers had 3 points, played 14 minutes, 1 for 4 from the three-point line. Maybe Jalen and Vince. Maybe Jalen and John Conchar. Maybe Gigi Jackson comes back. I would lean, all right, Jalen and Vince, let's go. Maybe Vince plays some 4. Also looking at the roster, like why is Lamar Stevens here? Looking at the two-way contracts, why is Yuki Kawamura here? The Grizzlies are 1-6 since the trade deadline without Ja Morant, and Yuki's played in none of those games. I mean, Zion Pullen, the other two-way combo guard, he's injured right now. I mean, Yuki, he's not here to play on the main roster. Should your two-way spots, I know they can't play in the playoffs, but what if we had, Jordan Goodwin, who's been starting games for the Lakers? Jordan Goodwin's on a two-way for the Lakers right now. Our two-way spots, Cam Spencer, and then 2 guys who don't play. One guy's hurt. One guy is just here for the hustle and for, social media views overseas. Anyways, the Grizzlies are back at it on Tuesday night trying to turn the ship around. They're playing the Utah Jazz. They've already had 2 very close games against the Utah Jazz this season. The Utah Jazz want to lose badly. Hopefully, the Grizzlies oblige them. You play the Utah Jazz on Tuesday. You wrap up the road trip against the Thunder on Thursday. Then you're home for the Lakers, the Celtics, and the Warriors. You finish the season, a road trip to Miami, then Detroit, then Charlotte. Then you've got this awful back-to-back Timberwolves on national TV, and then the next night is your one road game of the year against the Nuggets. Reminder, 1-11 against the top 9 teams in the West on the road this season. Then your last game of the year is against the Mavericks. That's 11 games to go. I think best case scenario, high end, you win 7 times. You go 7-4, hey, you hit 50 wins. Good job. 50-32. I think if you win 7 games, which I'm considering the high end of that, I mean, let's say, all right, you beat the Jazz, you beat the Heat, you beat the Hornets, you win your last game against the Mavericks. That's 4 wins. Then you got to win, let's say, 1 out of 3 against Lakers, Celtics, Warriors. And then maybe, let's say you win 1 there. Let's say you win 1 of the Timberwolves Nuggets back-to-back. And then that's still only 6 wins. It's going to be hard. I think most likely it's 5 to 6 wins. I think 4 wins is possible. I mean, if you win 4 games out of your last 11, very good chance you slide to the play-in. Right now, the Grizzlies are 2.5 games up on the Timberwolves, who are in 7th. They're 3 games up on the Clippers. The Clippers lost to the Thunder on Sunday night. The Warriors thankfully lost their last game. They're still 2 games behind the Grizzlies for 6th. But the Grizzlies are 5th right now, a half game behind the Lakers. I mean, they can still catch the Lakers. If you go 6-5, that might be enough. Also, you play the Lakers. I mean, that's just a huge game. We have so many huge games coming up. The Lakers game, the Warriors game, the Nuggets and Timberwolves games. These are monstrous games coming up. So the Grizzlies have a chance to control their own destiny. Although by definition, you can't control your destiny. The Grizzlies have the chance to right the ship some, but how optimistic will we be after that going into the playoffs? I don't know. Hopefully you're more optimistic than I am. Anyways, thanks everybody for listening to this difficult and tough episode. If you want to hang out with fellow Grizzlies fans, come join my Slack channel of Grits and Grinds listeners over at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. All right. Hope you have a great Monday. I'll talk to you soon. Go Grizz.